Welcome to round 4 of the Players Tour Final. I'm Daquan Watson, the new face around the place, but I brought a guy out of retirement to do some commentary with me that you might know, Paul Cheon. How's it going to be back out here, man?
Oh, it's going great. It's been a while since the last time I have covered an event, so I'm really excited to cover some of the matches coming up today.
Well, today we have a very cool match here in round 4 with Ali Warfield and Akira Asahara both playing Team Rec, but there's some interesting stuff that's a little bit different about their decks. Why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, both players really tooling their decks specifically for the mirror. And we've seen that already all day. Not a lot of removal being played in the main deck configurations of these Team Reclamation decks. Ali actually choosing to play 2 copies of Nightpack Ambusher in the main, whereas Asahara actually choosing to play 2 copies of Spectral Sailor. And I'm really curious to see which of those cards ends up being the superior option, because I've seen a lot of Teamer decks play both of those cards.
Well, yeah, I think it's going to be pretty exciting seeing those differences in action, because we are going to see quite a few Team Rec mirrors, but when you see some differences like that, has a chance to play well.
No way.
So let's go and take a look.
No way.
So Ali's just going to keep here.
Yeah, given that the players know the matchup. Yeah, given that the players know the matchup, it's just important to make sure you just keep a hand with, you definitely don't want to be missing land drops early, and Ali might not have cards like Growth Spiral or any of the ramp effects, but having that Mystical Dispute just makes you feel safe, right? The fact that you have that means that you're not necessarily going to fall behind on mana too badly. You have the option to Mystical Dispute early Growth Spirals, and yeah, I mean, Shark Typhoon also being one of the best cards in this matchup, as it allows you to put pressure on your opponent's life total. Once you do cycle that Shark Typhoon for a 2/2, a 3/3, or 4/4, that kind of puts the onus on your opponent to find a way to respond.
And when neither player really draws, say, like Wilderness Reclamation, or not Wilderness Reclamation, but Growth Spiral here, and the matches play a little bit slower, does that change how you're going to play the rest of the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think, oftentimes you're just kind of playing draw go, and really the thing that kind of gets the game going is who starts drawing those Shark Typhoons, right? Because once you do get the ball rolling with the Shark Typhoons, all of a sudden your opponent has to actually find spells. Either has to find Brazen Borrowers to get the Shark Typhoons off the battlefield, or maybe try to pressure your opponent by playing something else on their end step. Akira does have access to the 2 copies of Spectral Sailor, so that is also a threat that's very problematic that you need to deal with. But yeah, it does put the pressure. Now, Ali went for actually the 1/1 Shark Typhoon there, and typically when I have access to a lot of lands, I try to go for bigger Typhoons to put more pressure on, because when the games do draw out, and you have both sides just hitting a bunch of their land drops, all of a sudden one player will have the 3/3, the 4/4 Shark, and you just won't be able to do anything about it.
Yeah, it looks like Asahara here is going to go with this Uro, which makes a lot of sense, because you don't want to really lead in with the Wilderness Reclamation, I would assume, when your opponent has 4 lands open.
No, the thing is, you have 4 mana, you can get Ether Gusted, you can get Mystical Disputed, you can get just literally every card can interact with that. So you need to make sure that if you're going to go for the Reclamation, at the very least, you're going to need at least 1 counterspell backup to be able to protect that Reclamation.
Yeah, and Warfield's going for a second Shark Typhoon here, just keeping the pressure up.
Yeah, and right now, I mean, things are looking good for Ali here, right? She's got 3 damage coming in every single turn. Still probably not going for the Wilderness Reclamation. She does have Mystical Dispute backup here, but I suppose there's also the possibility that she plays out the Wilderness Reclamation. Akira goes for the counter. She counters back. But what if Akira has 2 copies of Mystical Dispute? So it looks like she's trying to play a little bit safe here, and given the fact that she has both Negate and Expansion to copy to Negate or Mystical Dispute, she wants to be kind of leaning on those counterspells instead.
Yep, and here we go with Uro. And it'd be interesting to see what the draw is here, how it affects the rest of this turn, because right now, looks like she already has a Mystical Dispute in hand she has access to. But you will get to put a land into play, so she's got all the counters to kind of protect her situation right now.
Yeah, so this is interesting. So she now no longer has the option to have double counterspell up if Akira chooses to go for a counterspell here. Chooses to go for Wilderness Reclamation plus counterspell backup. So this is a little bit dicey, but by doing this, she does get a little more mana on the battlefield, but she only has a negate up now. And given that there's 2 sharks on the battlefield, Akira does have to force the action here. So I think he's just going to go for the Wilderness Reclamation here, plus negate or Mystical Dispute.
All right, well, let's see. We're going to go ahead and looks like he's playing a land here, taking the damage, going to 15. And just as you predicted, playing the Wilderness Reclamation.
Yeah, and now he's looking really, really good here. He's got double Ali's mana at this point. In addition, he's got the Castle of Vantress to help kind of going through his deck. Also, if you look at his hand, he's got the negate, he's got the Mystical Dispute, so he's got everything going for him here.
Yeah, and Ali didn't even attempt to counter the Wilderness Reclamation there. Is it because she was assuming there'd be another counter and she couldn't win the counter war? Or do you think she's holding out for something else down the road?
Yeah, I think oftentimes if a player goes for that, you kind of expect them to have the counterspell backup. So perhaps at this point, she's conceding the fact that the Wilderness Reclamation is going to resolve and choosing to keep that negate up for a potentially lethal expansion explosion.
And if you're in Asahara's seat, like how long do you let these sharks kind of just sit here? You know, they're bringing your RD to 12, so you don't have that much time. You know, at what point does it become kind of the critical turn?
No, I mean, that's a really good question. I think you can still afford to take a couple of hits. You know, once you kind of get to the point where Ali could potentially cycle, Ali can cycle a 3rd Shark Typhoon for lethal. That's when you start getting a little bit scared.
Okay, well, here comes a negate, which does resolve. So again, we didn't get into a counter war over that Wilderness Reclamation there.
Right, but now, I mean, think of like Akira has the Mystical Dispute, he's got an extra Reclamation, and very importantly, he gets the Scry 2 here from the Castle of Vantress to help find more counter spells. And yeah, looks like a negate on top here, so things looking really, really good here for Akira.
Yeah, and this is starting to look like, you know, in this particular situation, whoever can land the Reclamation and protect it first is gaining a huge advantage as these turns kind of go further and further down the road.
Yeah, there's definitely this kind of back and forth. It's like a cat and mouse game where you're thinking about all the different combinations of spells and counterspell backup that your opponent can play with, and you have to be mindful of that when you're sequencing your spells. Uro in this matchup, typically, you're not really looking to cast Uro until the later phases of the game, because once you get to the point where a player has 5 or 6 mana, that's when you're in Wilderness Reclamation plus Dispute plus Negate territory, and you need to be able to have answers for not only the Reclamation, but the counterspell backup.
Well, it looks like we put some mana in our pool here. I think Asahara is just deciding how big of an explosion this is going to be.
Yeah, he's just looking to cast an explosion, draw a ton of cards, and still have Negate and Dispute up, so he's going to have an entirely full hand here after this, while also depleting Ali's counterspell.
Yeah, I think this is the tough spot for Ali here. You held off long enough, finally getting to this counter war, and looks like it's not going to go her way.
Yeah, I mean, I think the pivotal moment there was when Ali decided to go for the Uro, which gave Akira the opportunity to be able to resolve that first Wilderness Reclamation.
And now Asahara has an embarrassment of riches, you know, after that explosion goes off there.
Yeah.
Well, going to just get this Uro back into play and at least keep pressing the action. I mean, you're looking at Asahara only being at 12, so if this Uro can stick around for a turn or two, it's not going to take long.
Yeah, but Akira's also got 3 copies of Brazen Borrower. He was ready for the mirror. He's got 3 copies of Brazen Borrower in the main. Not only does this deal with problematic Uros that get escaped, it also deals with giant Shark Typhoon tokens. And, you know, I think kind of you might see this narrative unfold over the course of the event where Brazen Borrower becomes an extremely important card in the matchup, because not only do you get to bounce Shark tokens, after sideboard, Commence the Endgame is a very popular card that a lot of these Team of Reclamation decks play, and Brazen Borrower is a clean answer to that as well.
Asahara looks at just making use of those cycle lands here. Keeping the hand nice and full, going to 11 after a shark hit there.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I think, barring something kind of wild from happening, Akira just kind of has everything going for him here, right? He's got the Uro, he's going to be able to attack, he's got the ability to scry multiple times off the Castle Vantress with the 2 Wilderness Reclamations in play. He's got 2 negates, he can bounce the Uro that Ali has. He kind of just has most of his angles covered right now.
And Paul, for the viewers here, like when you're looking at Asahara's hand and you've got dueling Uros on the table, is there ever a point you're going to want to bounce an Uro with a Brazen Barrer?
Yeah, of course. Definitely. If you have a Brazen Barrer, you do not want them to attack with it. Because look, Ali's escaped the Uro, right? But if you bounce the Uro, Ali's just not going to be able to replay it anytime soon. So I think that's probably what he's going to be going for here. Because the one way Ali comes back from this is finding a string of 3-4 relevant spells by drawing a bunch of cards off the Uro and other cycling effects.
All right, so Asahara's here is just putting a lot of mana in the pool and just using all of it super efficiently here. I mean, taking advantage of having these 30 mana at his hands here just to do whatever he wants.
Yeah, I mean, look at this. I mean, just cycling the Triomes here. Still has a bunch of mana. It looks like he still has 4 mana in his mana pool. Still has a bunch of mana in his mana pool here. Probably going to use that to either scry off the Castle Vantress or, you know what? I mean, I think it's very unlikely that he's going to let Ali attack with Uro. So probably just bouncing the Uro, but we'll see what he chooses to do.
And we found another explosion, which, he's not far from just using it to end the game at this point, especially with having 3 spell counters in hand.
Yeah. Oh, and it looks like he just kind of let the mana go, and just wants to make sure he has every point of mana available on Ali's turn.
And interestingly, Ali picked up her 3rd copy of Mystical Dispute on that last draw.
Yeah, it's just not going to be great though because she doesn't have a Wilderness Reclamation in play. At this point, she's going to have to use multiple Mystical Disputes just to maybe counter something. And right now, I think her entire game plan revolves around trying to get an attack in with this Uro, so that's why she's fighting over this right now.
There goes the 2nd Mystical Dispute.
He's like, okay, I guess I'll pay for this one.
And he just has so much mana right now on the opposite side of the board there. Can't imagine. Yeah. Oh, he actually have to pay for it.
So you know what? This is a scenario where Akira goes, you know what? I'm okay here. Maybe he takes the trade, maybe he doesn't, but I think in his eyes, the only way he can lose from this position is if Ali somehow manages to stick a Wilderness Reclamation with counterspell backup. And he wants to make sure that he wins that counter war by having access to the double negate plus the dispute in his hand.
That's a pretty savvy play, honestly. You can tell the experience of the players in this event.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of players who would have tried to fight over that last card.
I mean, Akira's been a pro since before I started playing Magic. He's been playing since 1997. So he's been playing the game for 23 years at a high level too.
All right, so we're gonna hit this Castle Vantress, scry some things, one on top, one on bottom, which is another Brazen Barrer. Get rid of this Fabled Passage.
So now Akira has access to it looks like 33 mana. So with the trigger, if he has access to 33 mana, he can go for an explosion for 25 and still has access to double negate.
Sometimes when you got it, you just got it all. Opted to go ahead and get an Uro back out of the yard, go back up to 17, get one more card just for fun.
Yeah, might as well just play it safe here. You just have all the resources in hand right now. You have triple Ali's mana. You have the scries going. You have the negates. You have the expansion explosion. I mean, it's going to be really, really difficult for Ali to come back to this.
I even love the greed on getting all the mana, because even though he already had access to 33, it's like, you know what? I'm just going to take 2 from this last land. Just make sure I can get 3 more mana this turn.
Yeah.
And now I think
Yeah,
it's
it
just
looks like
setting
he's.
up how big of an explosion we want to try for here.
No, it looks like he's actually just going to kind of be a little more patient here. Have Uro whittle
Okay.
down the life total a little bit so he has more mana to play with. Because it is not a lethal expansion explosion. Not only that, his hand is already kind of stacked relative to the number of cards that Ali has in her hand. So he knows that anything that she plays, he'll have answers to.
Well, the shark is
So he
trying to
doesn't
get
really
in there
want to
for
be
some
this way.
action. But the shark's getting bounced
Wow,
by
look
a
at
petty
this.
theft.
Bouncing
Yeah.
the 1/1 shark. That was the final straw. It's like, you know what? No, I am done.
That's just so tough when you're down to that point.
Right.
So we've been looking at Narset's Reversal here in a couple of these sideboards. So how often have you played with that card?
After losing to lots of thought distortions while climbing the ladder, I have periodically put it in and taken it out of my sideboard. What I've noticed, though, is I've been following all kinds of different Team or Reclamation decks that people have been playing. And when I specifically, I've seen a lot of the top Japanese pros play the copy of Narset's Reversal. And I even spoke with Corey Baumeister. He also really loves this card as a one-up. It's really, really nice against specifically the card Thought Distortion, but you can also use it against Commence the Endgame, right? Because it doesn't counter Commence the Endgame. So if your opponent casts it, you can use it to bounce it back to their hand and get your own copy. Additionally, it's also pretty useful in counterspell wars. So I think it's very, very close, especially if you're already packing your deck with a lot of counterspells, to have it be an additional pseudo counter / card that gets you out of some sticky spots against cards like Thought Distortion.
Yeah, I think it's just one more point to this event where the players have been really putting in time, and it shows when cards like Narset's Reversal are getting an opportunity to come out.
Yeah, absolutely. One interesting thing here is I don't see that fourth copy of the Negate here coming in.
Interesting. Why do you think that is?
I think maybe, given that players have access to deck lists, there are definitely threats after the sideboard that you can't negate. So being stuck with a handful of negates when your opponent's trying to play a Night Pack Ambusher or possibly cycling Shark Typhoon or casting Commence the Endgame, sometimes negate is not the actual card that you need.
Okay, well, it looks like we kept 7 here. Just starting with the Triome, so nothing too surprising there, but this does, again, look like a pretty slow hand, so we're not going to get any of those fast growth spiral starts here.
Yeah. Oh, and
looks like we just skipped ahead a little bit.
all right, and it looks like we see a Wilderness Reclamation being countered here. Oh, but then Mystical Dispute backup, so...
Yeah.
Oh, and look at Allie's hand. I mean, it's super clunky, but she's got her own Reclamation in play.
And neither player's really holding spell counters at this point.
Right. But I think Allie at this point going to float the mana, cast the Commence the Endgame here. Probably wants to tap that Blast Zone. It always wants you to tap the Blast Zone, but not tap the Blast Zone.
But looks like we're hitting a bump in the road here.
Yeah, it looks like there might be some technical difficulties here, but it looked like a Commence the Endgame.
Okay, well, we got a win, they're telling us, from Asahara. So I guess we're going to let people look right at us for a little bit. And really, let's talk about this event, though, Paul. We have players that qualified, 8 different ways qualified for this? And, when we were talking in the pre-show, we were just looking at the quality of player in the event is so high for this thing. Like, how much fun would this be for you to get to play in?
I mean, at this point, I would love to play in any event, any big event. Yeah, but absolutely, you nailed it. We were, in our coverage meeting just leading up to this, we were talking about just how stacked the field was. If you kind of compare it to, what the Pro Tour was in the past in terms of attendance, if you just kind of got all the Platinum pros, the Gold pros, and the Silver pros and put them in a tournament, that's almost what this field looks like. And the average number of years for each competitor at this event was something like 10 years or something. I mean, we have a really experienced group of people playing here, and also a ton of accomplished players too.
You know, another interesting thing is looking at how the decks kind of lined up. You know, it looked like everybody either came with the most teched version of Reclamation they can come up with, or a really aggressive deck to try to punish them and then, you know, just hard target them. So I'm kind of curious, if you were deck building, where would you have kind of prepared, or where would you have come in on the line there?
You know, honestly, after messing around with a bunch of decks, I think I would have also chosen to play Team of Reclamation, tuned specifically to beat the mirror, and that's what a lot of the players here chose to do.
Look like we are back into the match here. So it looks like we're picking up in game 2 with Asahara still up a game here.
All right, looks like we are rewinding a little bit from what we saw.
Yep, so we're on Asahara's turn 3, it looks like we're at here.
And given that Asahara doesn't really have a whole lot of counter magic here, wonder if he's just gonna go for the Uro here to develop his mana.
Yep, that's exactly what happens here. So he's playing the Uro, going to 23, but doesn't draw any more action off of that Uro.
So he drew the Mystical Dispute, and he could have chosen to tap in a way, like play a land and make sure he has Mystical Dispute up. But having up Mystical Dispute doesn't do a whole lot against the card Wilderness Reclamation. So it looks like that's why he just kind of chose to tap his mana the way that he did.
Now, interestingly, he has an opportunity to go for his own Wilderness Reclamation here, and will have Counterspell backup. So this makes it pretty interesting.
Yeah, Allie's got a Mystical Dispute, but what's really awkward is her mana. She could have, if she had access to another blue or red source, she could have Mystical Disputed it, and then cast Expansion to copy one of the counterspells to get this Wilderness Reclamation off the battlefield.
All right, so we are going to use the Mystical Dispute.
Me. It costs 3 mana. It costs 3 mana. Nope.
Yeah.
It would not have worked. Right. Pardon me.
So we see a Dispute, hit a Dispute, and now everybody's got double their mana.
Everybody has double their mana, but Allie, I mean, she's going to be the first person to take advantage of this Wilderness Reclamation. We got to commence the end game here for a 5/5.
Yeah, this is pretty big. And we're still going to have mana open. That doesn't necessarily do anything yet, but it does create an interesting situation here with neither player having any spell counter. So it's just, we're almost top decking with Wilderness Reclamation decks, which is something you don't see all that often.
Yeah, so Asahara now has the option of either cycling Shark Typhoon for a 3/3 or choosing to scry and look for one of his 3 Brazen Borrowers. Additionally, if he waits on the Shark Typhoon, he can actually choose to make a big Shark token to be able to block the 5/5.
All right, well, with those 2 cards, we pick up a Castle Vantress and a Negate, it looks like. And Asahara is going to go ahead and spend the mana to scry with that Castle Vantress.
Yeah, he really wants to find something like a Brazen Borrower here, but Allie's looking really great here. She's got the Negate back up here, and then once she gets to untap, I mean, that's another commence the end game with multiple copies of Expansion Explosion.
And this is tough. We see another Uro, but again, I don't know if Uro's really doing much here unless we just draw something really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, Akira just being a little bit patient here, thinking that, you know, he can take a couple of hits here off the 5/5 and just wanting to develop his mana more and just kind of win by having the mana advantage in this matchup.
Well, Uro definitely is going to do that. Gonna go up in life here, have a land in hand to get onto the board. Taking 2 to go to 24.
Yeah, and
now I guess it's decision time.
So with the Reclamation, he's going to have access to 11 mana. So he can go for a Typhoon here, make a 6/6, and still have the ability to expansion something, which isn't all that useful. But, you know, making sure that you cycle and have enough mana in case you draw a card like a Negate is nice. Now, if he cycles and makes a 5/5, he then has the ability to potentially draw Negate, still have 4 mana up to be able to negate plus expansion to negate in case there's some kind of a counter war that might happen.
And how often do you see players really using the copy half, on expansion explosion?
Oh, all the time, all the time. Especially in the early phases of the game. I mean, frankly, explosion is a really clunky, really expensive spell, right? It's only really good if you can get a Wilderness Reclamation on the battlefield. Of course, you have those really long grindy games too, where you can play it for 3 or 4. But oftentimes, a common play is expansion your growth spiral, get my land, mystical dispute your growth spiral, right? That kind of puts you ahead. So there's a lot of times that you use to copy expansion explosion. Also, many times against, for example, various aggressive strategies, especially the mono white aggressive deck, where your opponent just has a bunch of creatures that die into 1/1s. Being able to play a Storm's Wrath and copying it also has happened many times.
And here we have Asahara, where from that cycling, he did pick up an Aether Gust. So that's probably going to come into play here at some point.
Yeah, it's a big draw, but look at Allie's hand. It is totally stacked, and she actually chose to attack here, which suggests that she's going to go for an explosion here on the shark for at least 2, but probably wants to at least keep up negate plus mystical dispute up here.
Now, if you're sitting in Asahara's seat, are you trying to get the Wilderness Reclamation off the table with that Aether Gust? Or have you just decided, like, it's just going to be there for a while, you need to hit something else with it?
I mean, I'm looking to save my 7/7 here. So if I can get away with that, that's certainly what I'm going to be looking to do here. Because, I mean, that's going to allow him to put pressure on Allie's life total and make it so that he doesn't need to commit as much mana to try to go for a lethal explosion. So this is pretty tempting here to go for an Aether Gust on this explosion for 2. Or 3, it looks like.
Yeah, and I noticed that Allie had started to explosion and then kind of reset it, and it looks like she's kind of playing with the numbers here.
Yeah, I think I feel like he kind of just has to go for it here. Allie, of course, has the backup, going to use that mystical dispute here and still have negate backup for that expansion explosion that Akira might have to go for next turn.
All right, well, the shark is being targeted. And it looks like Asahara is just deciding if it's worth fighting over or not.
Okay.
He opts not to be the answer. And we didn't really pick up anything great off of those cards. We got a couple of land and a growth spiral. But at this stage, I guess Allie needs to get more mana into play anyway, so maybe that's not an awful pickup.
Yeah, no, I would argue that this was actually quite good in the sense that Growth Spiral is phenomenal right now. The only place where she's currently behind is just in the mana war, right? So being able to have that Growth Spiral, get those lands in place so that she could at least be at parity in mana or very close with Akira is huge.
Here comes another Uro. And it does resolve.
And you know, this is a lot of pressure though from Akira here. We have the Uro here and a Shark Typhoon.
Very true. And it's interesting that there wasn't any type of interference at all on that Uro hitting the table. But I guess it's a little difficult. I guess if you're in that spot, how much would you want to fight over when you know your opponent's going to untap with a Wilderness Reclamation?
Yeah, exactly. You're exactly right. And also, heads up there, a lot of people might have looked there and been like, why did Allie not go for the Growth Spiral there end of turn? Well, that would have completely tapped her out of blue mana, which would have left the door open for Akira to go for a huge expansion explosion to try to fill up his hand with counterspells.
So now let's say you're in Allie's seat. You know, you're finally getting your mana going. You've got your Reclamation. Your opponent only has 3 cards. Like, at what point are you going to try to get off, say, like another commence the end game or something else when your hand's full?
I mean, you know, honestly, you really don't want to let that Uro get out of hand. So at this point, I think what she's going to want to do is be able to get off and commence the end game that's big enough that would at least be able to trade for that Uro. And if she does it this way, floats the mana, casts the commence the end game, she's going to have a 7/7 Uro, which is going to be, sorry, not a 7/7 Uro, a 7/7 army token.
Yeah, we already have
that should be
problems
big
with
enough.
Uro. We don't need Uros being 7/7s. It's okay.
Yeah, I don't think it's good enough. I think we need to knob it up with make it a 7/7.
All right, so we're going to commence the end game, just like you predicted.
Yeah, this is tough. There's not a whole lot Akira can do here too to kind of punish this. You could go for an explosion for 2, maybe hope that Ali counters it and then get a 6/6 token instead. But even then, that would be a trade.
We picked up another Shark Typhoon and an extra backup Mystical Dispute, so now Ali's holding 2 of them.
Yeah, given that
Asahara
Ali's
just
so
figured
far
you make
ahead
a
on
4/4 Shark.
Yeah, given that Ali's so far ahead on resources here, Akira just needs to be aggressive here, make that shark, try to get in for some lethal attacks. And wow, that negate was a good draw.
And now, at this point, if you're in Asahara's seat, like, can you attack efficiently here?
Yeah, well, he can go for the attack and maybe do something very similar to what Ali did in the previous turn, right? Or a couple of turns ago, where she goes, hey, block this if you want. It'll take the damage, and then end of turn, float a bunch of mana, go for a pretty big expansion explosion to get your bigger creature off the battlefield and refill my hand. So that's probably what Akira's going for here.
Well, he drew a land, which is a Triumph, so it looks like he's deciding if he's going to keep it to cycle it or if it needs to come into play.
Yeah, the one thing Akira has to consider here is just how big he wants this expansion explosion to be, thinking about the various counter spells that Ali could be holding in hand. The 2 big ones, of course, being Mystical Dispute and Negate.
All right, well, looks like that Uro did get blocked, putting all the mana in the pool on Asahara's side.
That's 9 mana, 10 mana. This plays if you tap 10 mana, that's 6.
Yep.
Yeah, so by doing
so
this,
he's definitely
plays around...
contemplating how big he wants this to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And it looks like the number he's going for is 6. This allows you to play around up to 2 Mystical Disputes and still have the mana to negate.
And it's huge because, as it turns out, Ali has exactly 2 Mystical Disputes.
Yeah, and she has 2 Mystical Disputes, and she doesn't have the ability to copy with the Expansion Explosion because there's that forest that's in play.
True.
But she, of course, had to tap that way to be able to cast the Commence the Endgame, I believe.
So yeah, so the mana's sitting here, but Asahara looks like he's probably still debating if he wants to try to go bigger with it or not.
I mean, if this resolves, I mean, this is going to be huge. But at the same time, you know, if there is this big epic counter war, then Ali will be able to untap and cast her own Expansion Explosion.
So it looks like Ali, knowing that extra green mana is not going to do much, just decides to use it for a Growth Spiral, which draws an island.
And she can't really fight over this.
Yeah, this is tough. You know, knowing your opponent's going to be picking up 6 cards here.
Wow, but the way Akira tapped, I mean, this is so big, right? Because now Ali might feel the pressure to go for an Expansion Explosion here with double Mystical Dispute. And he has the ability to pay for both and have the... Oh, gosh. and now look at his hand. I mean, he's got the
Commence
reversal
and the Narset's Reversal.
Yeah, he's got it all. That was huge.
Yeah, that's probably one of the better Expansion Explosions that we've seen today so far. And
I kind of want to see this.
That lowly Spectral Sailor is going to come in and get to do some work with that Wilderness Reclamation being on the table.
All right.
Amusingly, Ali also picked up a Narset's Reversal.
Yeah. I have been a part of some pretty ridiculous stacks playing this, playing the Team of Reclamation Mirror, where you just have counters on top of counters on top of counters, then Narset's Reversal on your own counter, getting your counter back, countering their counter. It gets pretty wild.
Well, we may get to see some of that as this game comes to a close here in a bit. So we're making what we're calling a big shark at 6/6.
I'm curious what Akira's going to do here. He's always been playing it very patient and, always making sure that he has access to counterspell backup in case Ali goes for something. A certain number of people would have certainly felt compelled to just go for commence the endgame their end of turn, for example.
Yeah, definitely being patient. Even here, tapping, we're getting a card. And slowly but surely, he's turned his. When you talked about being behind on resources, 3 turns ago, he's really starting to pull ahead here.
Yeah, I mean, he was able to navigate a situation where he was able to resolve that explosion. And typically, the person who does get that off first is the one who kind of comes out ahead, right? Because all of a sudden you got to refill your hand. You have access to all the counter spells in the world for the matchup.
All right, so we got a Fable Passage. Oh, what's going on? Oh, we got another Uro. That's what's happening here, coming out of the graveyard.
Yeah, an escaped Uro. And one interesting thing is when you're sideboarding in this matchup, there seem to be so many good cards in the matchup. One question is, how many Ether Gust do you keep in? A lot of decks have up to 4, but that's something that you're not exactly sure of, because sometimes you have these games that go really long, and all of a sudden, people are escaping Uros, and if you don't have access to that Ether Gust, all of a sudden Uro becomes highly problematic.
Yeah, this is starting to go south a little bit here for Ali, especially with the life totals also being large. Even though you have a 6/6 shark, it looks like it's going to be kind of hard to get in any type of real racing situations here.
Yeah, the issue is she has the expansion explosion, but she's got those mystical disputes, which at this point aren't especially effective. We're now entering kind of the late game phase of the game where the mystical disputes just aren't going to be that good at countering spells, especially because both players have Wilderness Reclamations in play.
Yeah, Asahara just has so much mana right now.
Yeah. I will say, though, just from watching this matchup, though, just really impressive the way Akira is navigating this game. It is not a surprise to see him here, but I'm definitely seeing how he plays the Team of Reclamation deck and comparing it to how I play the Team of Reclamation deck.
Yeah, it looks like we're having a big think here during Asahara's end step. And we're going to put a counter or a couple of counters. Oh no, we're actually just going to use the mana to Castle Vantress. Putting some lands on the bottom of the library there.
Yeah,
and only picking up Growth Spiral.
I'm trying to figure out what she needs to draw here, because Akira's got double negate and Narset's reversal in hand here. Perhaps it's a Shark Typhoon because that's an uncounterable effect. But I mean, Akira's just so far up on cards here. He's got more lands in play. He's got that active Spectral Sailor and more hard counters in hand.
So we put the mana in, going ahead and go and cast this Growth Spiral, and there is a Shark Typhoon.
7/7?
Yeah, as I say, so the question is, how big do we go here?
It seems to me that it seems to me that you want to at least go for 7. Make a shark so that you could at least be able to block and eat the Uro that's in play.
Yeah, so first order of business you're saying is find a way to get this Uro off the board.
Yeah. And as you can see, Akira even boarding in Scorching Dragonfire in the matchup, aware that Ali has access to those Spectral Sailors as well in her sideboard. So pretty heads up there. Another play that I've seen often is when somebody plays an Uro from their hand, with the trigger on the stack, casting a Scorching Dragonfire on the Uro so that it gets exiled so you can't escape.
That is definitely one of my favorite plays. All right, so we're going to get another card from the
Spectral Sailor.
Then you must be loving the situation right now.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. To be fair, who doesn't love drawing cards? Come on. Isn't everybody's favorite card Mold Drifter? I feel like everybody's favorite card is Mold Drifter.
lately my favorite card has been Elder Gargaroth, but it also has draw a card clause on it.
That's true.
So this Sailor has done a lot to help turn this around. I mean, it's been good for 4 cards already.
Yeah, he has so many spells. I mean, at this point, you're probably going to see him start to discard some of these mystical disputes, as they're not going to be especially effective.
Yeah, and this is tough. So Petty Theft is being put down on this giant shark, and that's going to clear the way for that Uro, I think.
Yeah, and of course Akira's happy with the trade here because that, you know, he's got so many spells that he can cast. Being able to escape that Uro again is going to be pretty simple.
Yeah, he's going to be able to load the yard just to discarding at this rate. All right, so Uro's getting in there, moving his life total to 30. I mean, did there ever reach a point in these matchups where your opponent's life total just gets so high you almost can't effectively explosion them? Because I don't believe I've ever seen that situation.
I mean, the thing is, though, you're playing 4 explosions in your deck. Oftentimes you see people shave, but if you get off an explosion for like 12, guess what? You're probably going to be finding the other one. And if it does get to a position where your opponent has too much life, then you can just wait. Once you have full control of the game, you can just wait till you have multiple reclamations in play and then just kill them that way. Kill your opponent that way. Additionally, you can deck your opponent, right? If they're at 100 life, you can deck them by just targeting your opponent with Expansion Explosion for 40 or whatever and just milling them.
Well, I think we're kind of starting to see that Asahara has his embarrassment of riches here and has finally used an Aether Gust to get that Wilderness Reclamation off the table.
Yeah, he's got full control of this game. This game is effectively over.
Brazen Bar just comes down into play, kind of adding to the team that's going to be attacking here shortly.
Yeah, and at this point, Ali just cannot afford to play around anything. You're so far behind. You just kind of have to go for it and just... Maybe he doesn't have a counterspell. Maybe he drew 8 lands. And just try to fire off one of these explosions to get the ball going.
Yeah, on streams, that's the move I call cover your eyes and hope.
Yep, that is the approach to take at this point when you're this far behind in resources.
And, you know, still making the play, leave the appropriate mana up, see if you'll get to use your spell counters. But as we can see with Asahara's hand, he has so many different choices and ways he could play this.
Yep. This is a
Commence the
large
game
token.
there.
This is a 10-10? Ooh, I like this. I like this. Going for it. Hope you don't have anything. But he's got something.
Trying to use a reversal on the commence the end game. Asahara is just kind of picking through his hand, deciding which of these many spell counters he's going to choose to use.
Which blue spell do I want to cast out of my hand?
Looks like we're going to go with a Mystical Dispute.
Yeah, it makes the most sense, right? Ali at this point has, what, 10 lands in play? So that is certainly the least effective card.
All right, so Mystical Dispute on the Narset's reversal. Ali using a Mystical Dispute on a Mystical Dispute, I think is how that stack looks.
Right, and at this point, she's doing that to hopefully tap out Akira out of his resources enough to the point where maybe she can try to resolve a big explosion here to get back into it. Kind of her way to coming back here is play that Wilderness Reclamation, cast a gigantic explosion with Mystical Dispute backup, and hope that it's enough.
All right, so the stack is cleared back down to just the explosion at this point. And Asahara's got 6 mana available and looks like still more action in hand.
He's like, you know what? I have 2 minis in hand. I was going to discard this anyways, so I'm just going to cast it. I think that's kind of where we're at here.
Yeah, and now it's rough, but we knew we were going to draw the Wilderness Reclamation.
Curious to see if he just chooses to let this resolve. He's got double negate. So, okay.
Yep, so negate targeting the Wilderness Reclamation. Mystical Dispute on a negate.
And this is heads up too. He lets the mystical dispute resolve. Although, so if he goes for the counter here, I mean, yeah, Ali just won't be able to do anything here, right? So
yeah,
she can choose to resolve the Wilderness Reclamation by copying the negate, but then she still won't have any resources. But that does give her
you untap with nothing in hand.
Off the top. Yeah.
And unfortunately, the board is already lethal.
Yep.
Yep, so it looks like Asahara is going to get that one 2-0. So, Paul, when you see those types of matchups, you know, and you see those cards like, say, that Spectral Sailor come into play, what does that make you think about cards in that scenario? Because, you know, we talked about so many people that are going to just one-ofs there.
Yeah, well, I mean, Spectral Sailor, you saw the power of Spectral Sailor in that matchup as the games go along. Not only that, it was kind of a strange game in the sense that both players resolved Wilderness Reclamation. So we got to see this game play out where basically everybody can just kind of play all the things that they had. And of course, the combination of Spectral Sailor plus Wilderness Reclamation meant that Akira just got way too far ahead on resources for Ali to be able to compete. But I think just even beyond that, he had access to more mana early, right? He was able to play out the Uro. He had, I think, 8 lands in play to Ali's 4. So he was just able to navigate the game much more comfortably because he had the ability to play around so many more cards.
Well, that was fun. But we're going to go ahead and step off to a break, and we're going to catch you with more Magic for round 4 right after that.
Javier already with a world championship under his belt, but still looking for that mythic championship title. And we are one match away.
That's right. Wow. Didn't go the way that he wanted there in that third game. He made it interesting with the Embercleave, but the mulligan to 5 plus the triple Ether Gust from John Emmanuel Duprat made it very unlikely for him to win it. He couldn't quite get the job done.
Yeah, it's really important to get your opponent's life total low enough where, you know, oftentimes the Bant Golos deck will be able to cast their sweeper and still be alive, but you want to get them low enough to the point where then you can follow that up with a haste creature for the final few points of damage.
John Emmanuel going through the motions here, trying to find any possible way out of this mess. Javier knows he cleared a huge hurdle when John Emmanuel did not have Ether Gust in his hand, and now he's just waiting.
If he does it for 4, it's over.
It's
Javier
over.
Dominguez slams Guardian Hellkite, and that's going to be it.
Javier Dominguez sits back in his chair. All he has to do is play his mountain. He's counting
Doing
it up.
now, adding it up.
100% sure. It is time to Gruul Smash. Good game at the queue here for
He's
John
getting
Emmanuel
ready.
Duprat.
Just got to slam the haster.
He's counted it up. He knows how much damage he can do this turn. There's Skargan Hellkite, everything in the red zone, and Javier Dominguez is your Mythic Championship 5 winner! Congratulations, Javier!
Unblockable. Wow.
Unbelievable stuff. It really came down to that turn, Paul, where you saw Javier look at the camera and go, please, 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 please. And when an Evercleave stuck, he had it.
Welcome back, everybody. We're going to get right into some action in Game 3 with Andrew Beckstrom and Ryujay Marai, and let's just get to that deciding game right now.
Yeah, and it looks like we have Team of Reclamation, another Team of Reclamation mirror-ish. Andrew Beckstrom actually choosing to play the 4-color Reclamation deck that was the second most popular deck in the field, specifically because they wanted to play with the card Teferi Time Raveler to give them an edge in this specific matchup.
Yeah, and this is the first time we've gotten to see the 4-color Reclamation on camera today, so it'd be interesting to see how this plays out here in this third game.
Yeah,
both players with slow starts with tap lands here.
It's really interesting to see, you know, kind of this matchup go back and forth, because a lot of people knew of the existence of this deck, but still opted to go for the straight 3-color version of the deck instead of the 4-color version. So really curious on kind of the mindset of the people who did choose to bring these decks on, you know, if the teamer decks thought that their deck was consistent and that's why they decided to go for this, or if there's something else about the 4-color rec deck that they didn't like.
Well, it looks like Andrew was able to get to 4 mana with the help of that growth spiral, but really not a lot to do with that mana here.
Yeah, Andrew's got a couple of expansions here. He's got the Ether Gust, but actually he doesn't have an answer, doesn't have a great answer to that Spectral Sailor. But it looks like Ryuji at least wants to play around Mystical Dispute and just being patient here. That's the one thing in this matchup, by the way. It doesn't even necessarily matter what's in your hand. The fact of the matter is your opponent knows the cards that you could have, right? Your opponent knows that you could have a dispute. Your opponent knows that you could have negate. So people are just generally going to be a little bit cautious. That's where a card like Shark Typhoon comes in, because that kind of forces the action. So even if your hand doesn't have a counterspell, if you just keep up all your mana, oftentimes your opponent's just not going to do anything, which then could give you some time to come back and develop your hand with counter magic.
Well, it looks like we did flash in a Spectral Sailor, but weren't really ready to attack with it. And now, again, is this because of stuff like Shark Typhoon that you don't want to put it at risk?
Yeah, definitely. The reason why Spectral Sailor is in the deck is not because it's a clock, right? you just want to put it in your deck so that you can use it as your card draw engine. Additionally, people play cards like Brazen Borrower. Your opponent can just cast Brazen Borrower on top of Shark Typhoon to block and trade with the Spectral Sailor.
Now, this looks like a pretty aggressive play to just get rid of that Spectral Sailor, going ahead and trying to just spin the mana, tap out, and use the explosion, and it got very quickly negated.
Well, Andrew has an extremely reactive hand here, and with the type of hand that he has, he kind of just needs to get that Spectral Sailor off the battlefield, or it will bury him.
Yeah, I don't think it's often we get to see matches where Spectral Sailor is the critical card. So here we're going to go to cycle this Triome, and we do find a Brazen Borrower.
I mean,
and,
maybe
we see them
Andrew's
fighting over. I say we see him fighting over a Spectral Sailor like that. Like, does that really just speak to the importance of that card in this matchup?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why you saw Akira in the previous matchup bring in something like a Scorching Dragonfire. Oftentimes, when you see the existence of a card like Spectral Sailor, I've seen people sideboard in cards like Bone Crusher Giant just to make sure that they have an answer there. Additionally, with more people playing 2 to 3 copies of Brazen Borrower, Bone Crusher Giant isn't even all that embarrassing, right? It just you will have targets over the course of a match if you bring it in.
All right, so the Spectral Sailor still staying home, just providing card advantage. And it looks like Andrew's trying to decide what to spend mana on here, if anything, during Murray's end step.
Yeah, Andrew's just in a lot of trouble here. I mean, just in the sense that Murray's drawn, 3 or 4 cards off the Sailor now? And Andrew, I think, is trying to put himself in a situation where he can get in a decent explosion while also having counterspell backup. So now he has mana to explosion for 2 and still be able to veto.
Looks like that's what's going to happen here. Oh, he left 1 open so you can use a Mystical Dispute, it looks like.
Because he drew Dispute off the top. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is going to resolve, and now, I believe this was main phase. So now the window is open for Murray to run something out there, but Andrew actually not getting super punished here because Murray does not have Wilderness Reclamation in hand.
He does have a Questing Beast, comes down, gets in 4 damage, puts Andrew down to 12. Gonna go ahead and just hard cast the Giant 4/3.
Okay, well, I mean, that resolving was huge. So now Andrew has a ton of options here. He does have the Shark Typhoon here, which can cleanly block the Bone Crusher Giant.
And looks like we picked up a Reclamation.
Looking to attack here first. I think given that Andrew's at 10 life, he kind of just has to go for a 5/5. You can go for a 5/5 Shark Typhoon and still have access to the Dovin's Veto.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and make that Shark.
And I think we're going to see Petty Theft here.
Yep, Murray's going to try to get it off the table. It does get met with that Dovin's Veto. Draws a plane off the cycle. The 5/5 Shark blocks the Giant, going down to 6. But we do get to land the Wilderness Reclamation, but not much behind it, though there is a Castle Vantress in play. 2 of them, actually.
There are 2 Castle Vantresses. So now, I mean, he gets a Scry 4, and at this point, you know, find relevant threats. Shark Typhoons and Expansion Explosions being the 2 biggest ones here. Top.
And we left both on top. Looks like top one, is that a Shark Typhoon? Was that what happened there?
It does look like a Shark Typhoon. Now, Andrew does have the answer here. He does have the Brazen Borrower. This is a very, very important card that you're going to see over the course of the weekend, as it is a very clean answer to a giant cycled Shark Typhoon. We've also seen people go super deep and play cards like Discontinuity to be able to find ways to counter a large cycled Shark Typhoon end of turn.
All right, so there is the Shark Typhoon. Gonna go ahead and attack with this Questing Beast. And the Shark is more than happy to go ahead and take that damage there.
Curious to see what Murray chose to bottom, because he went top.
All right, taking another look with this Castle Vantress here, putting it on top and bottom.
And that is an Expansion Explosion on top.
It's pretty spicy card when you get to draw one from the Shark Typhoon.
Yeah, but he's actually choosing to play it very patiently here, not cycling and making a large Shark Typhoon main phase. And the reason being is there's an additional wrinkle in this matchup. Because Andrew Beckstrom is playing the card Teferi Time Raveler, you don't just want to be making a Shark on your main phase. What you want to be doing is, even if a card like Teferi resolves, you want to be able to make the token end of turn so that you could actually pressure and kill Teferi.
And in situations like this, when you're limited on resources, but your opponent knows the match and can see your deck, how much equity is there in just leaving them with the unknown that you may or may not have a spell counter?
There definitely is some value. I mean, it's one of those situations, though, where if your opponent is so far behind, they're not going to play around anything anyways. So then you do play your land. But at this point, I think Murray feels pretty comfortable with the mana that he has. Look, he's got 9 lands in play, something like that, with the Reclamation. So I think he's looking to try to see if he can bluff basically having a relevant spell here by keeping those 2 cards in hand.
Well, but it looks like we're continuing the trend of Spectral Sailors not wanting to attack. And rightfully so, because it run into a giant up here.
So here's really where you get to see the power. Let's see. Beckstrom still has access to Dovin's Veto, so he needs to make sure that he has up white mana here. Not a giveaway at all, but needs to make sure you have white mana here so that you do not expose yourself to a giant lethal expansion explosion. Narset's Reversal. Would that work?
So we use Castle Vantress. End up getting just a Brazen Bar out of this. Taking 2 to go to 14. Going to end step, getting the triggers from the Wilderness Reclamation.
I think Murray's still probably going to play it.
We're going to just bounce that Uro there.
Does he go for it? Oh, he's going for it. You see the target. It looks like he might just choose to go for the explosion here.
Yeah, it's kind of a tough spot.
But we all know
you're running out of options and running out of time.
Yeah, we all know that this is not going to resolve. Oh, and choosing to try to basically effectively, we call this kind of time walking your opponent by basically, everything that your opponent did in that one turn didn't matter because you get to basically take your turn again if they choose to keep the spell on top. So now BK, Andrew Beckstrom looking in pretty good shape here. He doesn't have the Wilderness Reclamation in play, but this is the power of something also like a Dovin's Veto where no matter what, you feel safe. You know that your opponent cannot kill you with a lethal expansion explosion with any number of counterspell backup because Dovin's Veto just says no. Don't care what you have, can't be countered, counter your spell.
And we did find a Wilderness Reclamation off of that Uro And the shields are down. You know, all the cards your opponent has access to, which is only a Brazen Barrer here. And now that Spectral Sailor decides it wants to get some and puts the opponent to 13.
Yeah, now Andrew's gonna untap and Shark Typhoon for this. This is where, I mean, yeah, you can do it for a lot. It's nice to be able to make a sizable threat, but at the same time having mana to be able to scry to and also potentially Dovin's Veto. So looks like he wanted to give himself some options here.
Just countering the Brazen Barrer.
Yeah, and Andrew's going to get this. At this point, Murray has no other choice but to go for a gigantic expansion explosion, and Beckstrom has the Dovin's Veto here. And then he can play the Brazen Borrower, and that's just going to be a lethal attack.
Yep. Looks like we're just sizing up how big we can try to play this explosion for. But it does get met by Dovin's Veto.
That's the game.
Yep. That's going to do it. So, man, that was exciting there, kind of turning that around with those Spectral Sailors.
Yeah, no, definitely. Really, really well played game here. And Andrew, knowing, basically, he was in a position where that Spectral Sailor was kind of getting out of hand. So at some point, he needed to pull the trigger and just go for it, right? That's one of those cases where you cannot be too passive. If you are, you will get buried. So he went for that end step explosion for 2, knowing that it likely would be countered. But then that set him up later to be able to go for another explosion for 3 and have the counter backup, knowing that there very well is a risk that Murray could have Wilderness Reclamation plus Expansion Explosion, but he had to take that risk. Otherwise, that card was simply just going to beat him. So really, really well played by Andrew, and just putting himself in the best position to, and basically, having that one turn where he crossed his fingers, hoped a powerful 4-mana green card didn't hit the battlefield. It was just a questing beast, so he was okay.
Well, I think that's going to do it for my time here. We're going to go ahead and wrap up this round, go to a break, and we're going to catch up with you for round 5 right after this.
If you're sitting in Li Shitian's seat, you better be happy because he picked mono red under the assumption that he was going to be facing a lot of Golos in day 2. Remember, Li didn't have to play day 1. He earned a bye, and he's got the matchup. Rimal is on Bant Golos. Li Shitian looking at casting a 10th Street Dodger to try to pile on as much damage as possible. Or does he need to use that Knight to try to take down Golos if Carlos Rimal goes for the block? This is the question that Li Shitan has to answer. And as he's decided maximum aggression, he's going to go for the Dodger.
Yeah, it looks like he's going to run out Cavalcade here as well with the mana from the Runaway Steamkin.
Ooh.
And he'll have...
I guess that does give him the Rimrock Knight.
He'll have one mana...
Boulder Rush.
Right, he'll have 1 mana left over to either go for Boulder Rush or make one of the 10th Street Dodgers unblockable.
Yeah. I don't see how Rimal can get out in only 1 turn cycle.
Carlos needed to have a sweeper, and even if he did, he still would have been enough. Actually, if he found a sweeper, he could have run out the Arboreal Grazer. But that's still the double cavalcade of Calamity would still trigger off the Legion Warblast, and that still would have been lethal. So,
wow.
Yeah, I think this is it.
The metagame call from Li Shitian is going to pay off. He got the exact matchup that he expected here in day 2. This is why he's the only mono red player in the field, and he's into the top 8. Wow. Congratulations to Li Shitian.
Li Shitian. Oh my goodness. The only mono red player.
Look at him. He is absolutely overcome with emotion after making yet another top 8 on what is already a Hall of Fame career for Li Shitian.
Welcome back to the news desk here. Riley and I joined by Cedric Phillips. It's a great pleasure to have your company as we continue coverage of the Players Tour Final. Now, Cedric, still a lot going on, but we've just had our first couple of people lock up a day 2 appearance with their 4-0 performances so far. Might be.
Looks like my mic was muted, so
me.
I will say that again for you.
There we go. We got him.
I fixed it. Yeah, working from home, it's crazy. Checkpoints. And what this is all about, basically, when you run like this 2-day tournament, difficult tournament like this, you set little checkpoints and benchmarks for yourself. This is the first little checkbox here. 4 no means you're in day number 2. That's step 1, 4. It looks like a handful of people.
Yes, indeed. Of course, the journey doesn't end there, and the journey certainly doesn't end for a lot of people. Some of whom very near and dear to my heart as well. It's time for an Aussie update, everyone. It's time to start waltzing your Matilda and have a chat about the people who are doing this from the antipodes, from the other side of the world here. Unfortunately, hasn't gone too well for the Aussie contingent, I have to say. Dennis Chan, he's out at 4-0. Have a look at his deck list. It's a very sweet list. Sultai Graveyard deck, but couldn't get there, unfortunately. Isaac Egan, Iggsy, he's on Jan Sack, as joined by Kyle Gibson on Bant Ramp. Both these blokes are 2-2, both Melbourne boys, greatest city on earth, of course, don't worry about that. And David Mindsy Mines, the perennial captain of the Australian team, he's 1-3 on Bant Ramps up in Queensland, up in Bris Vegas. They're not the best day in the office for the Aussies, but it's worth remembering. They all started playing this tournament at 2 o'clock in the morning, and now, currently, it's about 7:30 in the morning. I was chatting to Rich about this behind the scenes, and he pointed out how it's funny because every tournament always has a time zone, right? But this one has all of the time zones. You've got people, cooking dinners, playing against people having their brekkie. It's incredible about, how the magic world has come together for this tournament around the world. But still, spare a thought for the poor old Aussies and for all the other heroes doing battle from, the far-flung reaches of the globe there in Asia, especially further out east, places like Japan. They're in the same boat. It's been a tougher tournament than usual for these players. Players essentially pulling all-nighters, and many of them still doing very well for themselves. So good on you, everyone out there in those rougher time zones. Of course, as an Australian myself, certainly my thoughts with you. Anyway. It's time, Cedric, for a very, very exciting unveiling of a brand new preview card from Double Mask coming to you exclusively on this feed. Now, people will have been following all the previews as they've come along, and here is the latest and greatest to come your way. Are you ready, my friends? It is, in fact,
so ready.
Pure Steel Paladin. Pure Steel Paladin will be appearing. We can have a look at it here. It will be appearing in Double Masters boosters. Now, Cedric, this is a card with an interesting pedigree because it actually has seen some, I don't want to say top tier play, but it has seen some play in competitive Magic.
Well, people have certainly tried, myself amongst them. Pure Steel Paladin, straightforward, white, 2/2 Human Knight. My kind of Magic card, given that I love mono-white strategies, but that's not what this card is for. Mostly seen in combo decks deemed Cheerios, playing a lot of 0-mana equipment alongside it. You have this on the battlefield, then you start casting the 0-mana equipment, you draw a card, you cast a card called a Reach Tract. I'll let you find folks that don't know that one, Google that, and be able to do it over again. But that's the competitive aspect of this card. It is, oddly enough, a combo enabler, or at least it's tried to be. But for the commander aspect, well, I leave that to you, my friend.
Mate, stop. Like, I know I'm supposed to build hype and excitement about this card being reprinted, but I am not a fan of it. Can I tell you, I am not a fan of this card. Like, in Commander, right? So there's only one good type of Boros deck, and it's an equipment deck. And this in the Boros equipment deck is so obnoxious. In Akiri, in Nazan, even in monocolored decks like Nihiri or Mardu equipment like Sir Gwyn, this card, it really, really lets people muck around with the equip cost, of course. But it's nowhere more obnoxious than in SRAM, Senior Edificer, in the mono white deck there. So I've lost to this card so many times. And I've just had about enough. But fans of Steel Paladin, rejoice, because you've got another copy of it coming your way in Double Masters. So there we go. That's our exclusive preview card. And right now, it's time to face forward, have a look to what's coming our way for round number 5. Got another match coming your way, and my goodness me, it is a special one. We've got Riku Kumagai, who is playing a mono-black aggro, playing against Bolin Zhang. And Cedric, you'll remember, I chatted to you about this 4-color Planeswalker list. Bolin was 3-0, doing very, very well with this deck. And what an incredible performance from him so far, with a list that I don't think anyone was expecting to play against.
No, this was not a deck that if you were coming into this tournament, you play tested against or you play tested with. This is brewing 101, and it's awesome to see. I know we're going to be getting that deck list in just a second, but we're going to go with a mono-colored aggro deck here first. In mono black, it's not mono green, it's not mono white, it is mono black with 4 Castle Lockmains and 2 Mobilized Districts, your key cards, Gutter Bones, Kitesail Freebooter, and Hunted Nightmare. I will say that even though this isn't the green or white versions, the goal here is still the same, Riley. It's to kill those Team of Reclamation and Growth Spiral players as quickly as possible. This deck doing it with some 1-drops, a little bit of disruption with that Kitesail Freebooter, and of course, we cannot forget about Spawn of Mayhem and Hunted Nightmare, these powerful 3-drops that these players can play ahead of schedule. So a lot of really good cards here, but enough of the boring mono-color deck. Let's take a look at the 4-color Planeswalker deck. You talked to me about this. We're looking at 13 Planeswalkers for Teferi, Time Raveler, for Narset, for Nicol Bolas, one Liliana Dreadhorde General, some removal to Season to Taste there with Extinct Event, Ritual of Soot, Cry the Carnarium. Heck, even the Elder Spell's making an appearance here, folks, but I did not expect to see 4 copies of Artist Oracle of Half-Truths in any deck, let alone this one here. You've got a crazy mana base that's tied together by Interplanar Beacon. We got a brew here, folks. If you are tired of Growth Spiral, well, take a look at this deck. This is a 4-color control deck with no green, no Growth Spirals, and it's winning. I don't know what you want from a feature match outside of this.
You very much do love to see it. And Bolan saying 3-1. Both these players, of course, at 3-1, which rather neatly brings us to the standings here. And it's very important to note something here, Cedric, about the point that we're at the tournament here. We've got a bunch of 4-0 players, and they have locked up day 2. We've already talked about that. We've already talked about the fact that our 4-0 players, undefeated so far, are going to be making an appearance in day 2. They'll be very happy with that. But the journey doesn't end there, because, of course, standings persist across the day 2 cut. And so there's a very big difference, Cedric, between ending up on 7 wins at the end of day number 1 and ending up on 4.
Yes, very, very big difference. Look, a tournament like this, again, it's going to be very, very difficult. We got a small field with a ton of amazing players. Every win is going to be huge for every single one of these players, especially with what top 8 brings along with it. And we can't forget about top 16, grand finals, and all stuff. But this is just, again, one checkpoint for some. We're going to see some 4-0s here in a minute, and every win matters. You mentioned it comes across on day number 2 as well, but in a tournament like this, Riley, you keep winning until they tell you you're not allowed to win anymore. That's the goal.
That's it. That's it. All gas, no breaks. You just sit there and you win and win and win until you're not allowed to play, not allowed to play the game anymore. So you know that people aren't going to take their feet off the accelerator as we head towards the home stretch of day number 1. Because again, being undefeated, having a positive winning record at the end of day number 1, the more wins, the better, of course, because of course it has impact on tiebreakers, has impact on your standings, your pairings, all sorts of stuff. So it's not as if these players have got a cruisy ride home or anything now like that. Now that they've got across that threshold, you did characterize it as being a checkpoint. It definitely is that. But as we have a look at the standings now, you can see that these players aren't quite out of the woods yet. But who are the players at the of the tables? Let's have a look, and we can kick things off here with, again, some pretty well-known names. The Danish juggernaut Christopher Lath at the top of the tables, Andrew Beckstrom, Alvaro Fernandez Torres, Ray Hirayama, Kazuro Noini, Christoph Prince, and, surprise, surprise, Seth Manfield, Alan Wu, players with very considerable and quite impressive CVs, all at 4-0, so we'll be seeing them in day number 2. And the very last 4-0 player, Akira Asahara, the legendary Japanese deck builder, is also sitting pretty in the 9th position currently, undefeated. We've also got a bunch of 3-1s there, and of course they will be battling more or less for a win in for day number 2, but they've got to keep the energy up, they've got to keep the focus up, Cedric, because there is still a lot of Magic to play. I'm being told that our players are getting seated, getting ready, shuffling, mulliganing, and so forth, and so we're not going to waste any more time. It is time for round number 5. Do stay with us. There's going to be a quick break, and on the other side of that, live Magic coming your way. See you soon.
We're in the finals here of Mythic Championship 6. I'm Marshall Sycliffe with Paul Cheon. Take a look at the trophy there as we work our way back into the feature match area. And we've got 2 very, very good players playing very, very well in the finals. And of course, if you thought for 1 second that this was going to go to anything other than 5 games, you were wrong. We're in game number 5. Paulo has Ether Gust, and he can just get that Krasis out of there, and that will actually allow him to attack Andre's life total down to 13 while killing Oko.
But I think this is pretty much all Paulo has.
That was kind of it.
Right? Strasky is still sitting at 13 life, and he just has a questing beast that Strasky needs to deal with.
Paulo is completely out of gas here. He has 1 card left in hand. It's a land. Can you imagine sitting in Andre Strosky's seat right now? He was staring down loss in the last game. He fought his way all the way back to win it, and now he's playing against somebody that when he first met him, he literally said, "You're my hero. Like, you're the person I watch on this very stream, and I want to be like you." And he's on the verge of beating him in the finals of a Mythic Championship.
I mean, again, this is literally what you're
sends
dreaming
the
about.
hand. Andre Strosky wins Mythic Championship 6. Congratulations, Andre.
Oh my goodness, what a turnaround. I mean, I thought Paulo had it. I thought Paulo had it in game 4.
I did too. Unbelievable. He stuck right in there, never gave up, and found the right lines. Andre played so beautifully here in the finals and in the whole top 8. A well-earned victory for Mythic Championship 6 winner, Andre Strosky.
Oh my goodness.